All right, this is 3b.1, so this was solving for the hypotenuse, and we are going to do some practice work here. If you look on the bottom of your page, number 7, it'll have the number down in the very bottom middle. This is going to be where we start. We're going to do questions 1 and 3, and then 7 and 8 on this page. And then on page 8, we're going to flip over and we'll do 9, 10, 11, and 12. You are welcome to go ahead and cross off 5 and 6 because we are going to skip numbers 5 and 6. We will never do them in this packet. So starting off with the first ones, 1 and 3, do the following lengths form a right triangle. So if you remember, we are just basically plugging these into the Pythag formula and checking to see if it works out. So looking for my biggest side, the 9 is it. So I'm going to do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Plug in my 6, plug in my 8, plug in my 9. And 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64. 9 squared is 81, so we end up getting 100 equals 81, which is not true. So this is not a right triangle. Take a look at number 3. We have 6, 8, and 10. Looking for my longest side, that's the 10. That's going to go in for my c. So I have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The other two can go in either order. 8 squared is 64, 6 squared is 36, 10 squared is 100. 64 plus 36 gives me 100, and 100 equals 100. So yes, this is a right triangle. Go ahead and take a look down at number 7. That's what we're going to do next here. So we are finding the missing lengths to the nearest tenths. So we're going across from the right angle. This is the hypotenuse. This is going to be C. So these two can go in as A and or B. So first thing is to write your formula. I'm going to just plug in the 4 for the A, the 8 for the B, C squared. 4 squared is 16, 8 squared is 64 equals c squared. It's going to give me a total of 80 over here equals c squared. I'm going to go ahead and take the square root on both sides. The square root of 80 is 8.944, and it keeps on going then. The directions here do tell me to round to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to go ahead and round to the nearest tenth, which would mean I'm looking at 8.9 for my final answer here. In the next one, right angle is here. Across from it is the hypotenuse, that's C. The other two can go in as A or B, however you see fit. So I'm just going to do 6 squared plus 3 squared equals C squared. 6 squared is 36. 3 squared is 9 equals C squared. This gives me 45 equals C squared. Taking the square root on both sides and then rounding to the nearest tenth, I'm looking at 6.7 equals C. If you flip it over to the next page, we're going to be doing 9, 10, 11, and 12, and then that'll wrap up our practice. Right angle, go across, that's C. So otherwise, I'm plugging in 7 and 10 for A and B. Remember, it can be in whichever order you prefer. So we get 49 plus 100 equals C squared. 149 equals C squared. I'm going to take the square root on both sides. The square root of 149 rounded to the nearest tenth will give me 12.2. Question 10, right angle across, here's C. So I am doing a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 3 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared. 9 plus 49 equals c squared. 58 equals c squared. Take the square root on both sides. Square root of 58 rounded to the nearest tenth is 7.6 is equal to C. Last two examples, 11 and 12. Right angle across, this is C. So I have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 7 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared. So 49 plus 4 equals c squared. 53. Take the square root. The square root of 53 rounded to the nearest tenth is actually 7.3. So I get 7.28, and then 8 will bump that up. Right angle across, this is C. So I have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. 2 squared plus 6 squared. 4 plus 36. 40 equals c squared. Take the square root and the square root of 40. rounded is going to be 6.3 equals C. That wraps it up for 3b.1, the practice packet pages.